Hello and welcome to this episode of the Expansive CEO podcast. I am your host, Hannah Chapman, and today is Thursday, July 3rd. It is currently 5:12 p.m. Eastern time to put a timestamp on it. And I am here solo today. Brad had some family stuff going on, so he is out for this week and will join us again next week. So I thought I would give a quick update. There is certainly a lot going on, but this episode is also dropping on July 4th, which is a holiday, Independence Day here in the US. So, what has been going on this week? We are still in a little bit of a quote unquote bad news is good news cycle. And that, like we talked about last week, is still fueling that really expectation that interest rates will start to come down. Now, the thing I kind of wanted to talk about today, I have a few things that are on my mind. One of them is the national debt and the national deficit here in the US. And the other thing is the big, beautiful bill, as they're calling it, the budget bill for 2025 that just got passed in the House of Representatives really early this morning, I think on Thursday, July 3rd, after being passed in the Senate with quite a few changes. So the House put it through earlier this week. The Senate took it over, made quite a few changes, and then kicked it back to the House. And the House did pass the bill early this morning after, I think, a couple of overnight deliberations and lots of moving parts happening there, different things being taken out, different things being put in. So I'm not going to go through very many of the specifics because I think we still just don't know a ton of the specifics of this bill, but we are pretty solid on what this does to the deficit and to the national debt over the next several years. And why does this all matter for the economy and for the stock markets and your investment portfolio? Again, a big piece of it has to do with one, it's two different things. One, interest rates, and then the amount of money we have to pay, that the United States has to pay to service its debt. And that is completely tied to the interest rates that we are seeing from the Fed. And then the other aspect of that is that for most Americans, the single biggest expense that you will have over your lifetime is the amount of taxes that you will pay. And so we have to be mindful in our financial planning, in our investment planning, in our estate planning. All of those aspects really are very much heavily affected by taxes, and not just by what we're experiencing right now, but what we expect to experience in the future as well. So I have a few different, statistics and things to point out and a little bit of research to share. And then we're going to talk about some tax strategies and some ways that you can create your own financial independence. So, as we are here on this Independence Day in the United States, how can you, as an entrepreneur, as a highly compensated employee, as someone who is growing in your financial education and knowledge and learning, how can you create both independence for yourself from these other systems, and understand the role of interdependence as well, because I do not believe overall fundamentally that we are here to do any of this alone. So we've got an interesting set of topics to cover today. So first, again, this bad news is good news cycle. We got a little bit of a negative revision on the jobs report that just came out. And what did that do? Well, we are up today on all the indices. If I look at how we ended the day, the Dow Jones was up 0.77%, or 77 basis points. The NASDAQ was up almost a full percentage point today, and the S&P 500 index was up 0.83%. So also close to a whole percentage up just for today. So we really did see, that surge, and we've seen it the whole last week, right? As we've seen a little bit of negative news coming out here and there, because again, the expectation is that if we have a softening job market, meaning, people are getting laid off, that means wages aren't rising overall as a pool, which means inflation should not rise as much, which then means that the Fed may be able to start reducing interest rates soon. So all of those factors, it's a domino effect, and the stock market looks at that domino effect and says, okay, if this domino goes down, if the jobs market, goes down, takes a decline, it's going to hit all of these other dominoes and allow the Fed to start lowering interest rates. That is, a good thing for people who are trying to get mortgages, a good thing for businesses, like we've talked about, especially small businesses who do tend to leverage debt, whether that's credit card debt or business debt or, small SBA loan, small business administration loan debt. Or lines of credit, right? Anything that reduces the interest that businesses and individuals will pay on their debt is helpful. That does boost the economy. On the flip side of that, it also lowers interest rates on high yield savings accounts, on money market accounts, and in the bond market as well. So what we could see is another flight, and this could actually also be boosting equity prices as well, is that if we expect money market rates to go down, then we also expect people to move from those money markets and high yield savings back into equities. So again, the future casting, the way that the stock market is a leading indicator, not a lagging indicator of how the economy will be doing in the future. All of these things are pointing to, okay, equity prices are likely to rise in the next 6 to 9 months. And so what are we doing now? We're future casting that. And that's what the stock market is saying by going up on these, supposedly or seemingly negative reports that we're getting. So going back then, so we're going to put a pin in the interest rates for a second. Going back to the US debt and the US deficit and the budget bill that is just getting through Congress right now, going to the president's desk to be signed. And I assume it will likely be signed because it includes, pretty much most of what Trump was asking for. One of the things that it does, and that has been shown over and over, is that it will increase the national debt and the deficit. So, with this big, beautiful bill, quote unquote, the Congressional Budget Office, the CBO, estimates that this bill in particular will add 2.8 all the way up to $3.3 trillion to the national deficit over the next 10 years. So it could be, again, up to 3.3 trillion added to the deficit over the next decade. Under current law, the way that the way that interest is currently being paid, the net interest that we are paying on that debt is forecasted to grow up to $1.8 trillion per year by 2035. Okay, so that means of the money that we take in, that the US takes in from taxes, $1.8 trillion of that could be used or have to be used for debt payments by 2035. So right now, if we look at the debt to GDP or debt to gross domestic product, which is how much the economy produces every year, debt to GDP is about 1 to 1. So 100%. 100% of our GDP is also, housed in debt. That's our ratio. But that's projected to rise to about 116%. So, debt will be 116% of national GDP by 2034. And the far out, probably not. What do I want to say there? It probably won't be this high by 2054. I assume there will be more changes made, but with the current estimates, if we project out, that could possibly reach 172% from the debt to GDP ratio. So debt could be 172% of annual gross domestic product by 2054. So that's way out there, right? But that's the trajectory that we're currently on. So that's what some economists and people who are looking at the more long-term effects of what we are currently doing with taxes and deficits are concerned about. Are we going to be able, as a nation, are we going to be able to pay the interest, the debt service on this debt for that much longer? So, one thing that I wanted to define, because this is pretty simple, but I know even for me, I was like, okay, I just need to put these in the right buckets in my brain. The national debt versus the federal deficit. The federal deficit is the yearly shortfall between what the government spends, what goes out, and what it brings in, which is mostly through income taxes. So our deficit is the federal spending minus the federal revenue. It hasn't been since 2001 that we had a federal surplus. So for the last 24 years, we have had a federal deficit where we have spent more than we have brought in from a federal level. So in 2025, here's the example. The US is expected overall to spend roughly $6.8 trillion. So 6.8 trillion going out, and it's expected to bring in about 4.9 trillion. So that's a projected deficit of $1.9 trillion in 2025. Okay. So that's the deficit. The deficit is the current difference between what the US is bringing in and what the US is spending. The national debt, on the other hand, is the total amount that the US government owes that's accumulated over time. Okay, so again, the last time, excuse me, that we had a federal surplus was back in 2001. So for the last 24 years, we've had a deficit. We've been spending more than we're bringing in, and that deficit has been adding up over time. So current, as of July 2025, our current federal debt is 36.3 trillion total. That goes way back, right? But we can think of it as since 2001, we have been adding a little bit. So if we think of it like a household, you've been spending on the credit card for 24 years. we'll say, right? And you've been every single year, you have spent more than you've brought in. That's what's been happening. For a long time, economists have debated whether this matters or not. Because if we think back to, the Great Recession in 2008, 2009, what happened to interest rates at that point? We've talked about this before on the podcast, but interest rates came all the way down, like essentially came down to zero and stayed there for an extended period of time. And so when the debt payments are that low, when we're paying a quarter percent to service that debt or less, well, yeah, then, print the money. It doesn't matter, quote unquote. Like I'm not actually saying that I agree with that. But when interest rates were very, very low, 1% or less for an extended, multi-year period, yeah, the debt service was not difficult. And if interest rates had stayed that low for a long time, even longer and just continued there, that's kind of where economists on one arm or one side of the aisle were saying, maybe it just doesn't matter. We can just print money. Modern money theory stating that we just print it, just print more money when it's needed, and we'll deal with it. And we'll deal with the interest payments as they come. Well, when inflation went crazy in 2021, right, and we had 9% plus inflation year over year and even higher, depending on what sector you're looking at in the economy, the Fed had to step in and do something. The Fed had to raise interest rates by their current mandate, whether that's overall, the right economic model or not. I'm not here to debate that at this moment, but with their current mandate to, keep interest rates in that 2 to 3% range, and also to keep the jobs market going. Those are the two things that the Fed is trying to balance. Those are their mandates. And so, in order to bring inflation way down, that's the lever that they have to pull, is to bring those interest rates up to help inflation come down. As we experience those interest rates going up, not only does that mean that the national debt is now at a higher interest rate, right? That means the projections going forward also get worse. So that's where, when I said before, like by 2054, are we really going to be, at that 170 something percent debt to GDP ratio? I don't know. I don't necessarily think so. I think we'll have to have some self-correction before then. But it does get to be, if we stay at 5, 6% on that national debt service that we have to pay, 5% every single year on that $36.3 trillion and rising, that's where it starts to get really difficult to pay those debts over time. So, why does this matter? So, when the annual deficit keeps growing, the national debt is going to keep increasing, and the interest that we have to pay is also going to keep increasing. So, in 2025, the US debt service is going to be just about $950 billion just on interest payments. And right now, that's more than the defense budget and the Medicare budget. So it's big. It's a big part of the national budget that we really have to pay attention to, because if we really are, by 2054 at 170 something percent of, debt to GDP ratio, then we have to be planning for that future tax policy that's going to have to address that. right? Potential future austerity measures that might have to address that, potential further cuts to Medicare or Medicaid or other social programs, right? So these are all pieces of the financial planning puzzle that, I am also looking at when I'm doing these future casts and future forecasts for my clients and when we're doing tax planning, when we're looking at Social Security and what might be available, all of these things. Like these are really, really important aspects to just keep in mind and to know, okay, so what do we do now in order to plan for the most probable future? So that's where we get to this. How do you create your own financial independence? That's where I want to go for today. There's certainly a lot, and I had several thoughts on many of the other provisions of the bill, but I will save those for a different episode after we know a little bit more about what's in there. So just to touch on a couple of those things, so you know what I'm looking at. One, the cuts to Medicaid and SNAP benefits. Those are very, very concerning to me. The pieces that could be positive are the taking away the cap on the SALT, SALT, which is state and local tax cap that had been capped at $10,000 for a lot of people in a lot of states. That cap is potentially being removed, or not removed necessarily, but what I've seen is going up to $40,000 instead of $10,000, which makes a big difference for people who live in high cost of living states, California, New York, plenty of others that have just very high property taxes. Those are part of the state and local tax deduction. So even when I was in Ohio, there are areas of Cincinnati that have, significantly higher real estate taxes than other areas. And so those people who live in those particular areas and neighborhoods, they might be paying $9,500 on a fairly reasonable priced house. They might pay almost $10,000 in real estate taxes, and that takes up almost the entire deduction. So they don't actually get to deduct all of their state and local taxes. So anyway, that could be going up, which would be, a benefit to a lot of my clients and a lot of people that I work with, especially on those in those higher cost of living areas. And it could also make permanent some of the business deductions that are helpful for people. So there are both sides of the spectrum here, from things that I'm concerned about and things that will be helpful overall, especially to business owners. So as we know more about those, as those things start to come out of like what's actually been passed, we'll be able to talk about that. For now, though, I want to talk about Roth IRAs and Roth 401ks, because these are going to be even more important strategies to be looking at when possible. And right now, the way the tax code stands, with a Roth IRA or a Roth 401k, I'm going to explain the difference between those in just a moment. You pay taxes on the money that you put into on your contributions. So it is not a tax deduction. You do not, get to lower your taxes by $7,000 if you contribute to a Roth IRA in 2025. You do pay your taxes on that money. What's the benefit of that? Why is that better? It's because when you turn 59 and a half and maybe you retire, let's say you retire at 60, because you've planned and you're good. You want to retire at 60 and start taking money out of your retirement accounts. Anything that you have in your Roth IRA, it has already been taxed because you paid the taxes on it when you put it in. It has grown tax free over the entire course of, its investment life. All of the gains have been tax free. And when you go to take that money out, you do not pay taxes. It is a tax free withdrawal. And so, what do we want to do? Why is that so important? Everything I just said, because we do not know what tax rates are going to be in 20 years or 30 years or 40 years, depending on when, your retirement era starts. But based on current federal debt and ongoing federal deficit spending, it's very, very hard to imagine that tax rates will be able to truly come down, especially for anyone who is, in the lower tax brackets right now. The other aspect of the budget bill that was just passed is that it does include tax cuts for the wealthy. The people that are benefiting the most are those who are in that top 10%, but especially in the top 1% of income earners. And then, going down from there, people get less and less benefit to the point where it's actually detrimental, which is, again, another big concern for me overall in this bill. But beyond that, right, like if we have national debt and national deficit that continues to grow, if you are in your 40s and you plan to work for another 20 or 30 years, or you plan to, just continue if you're in alignment with what you want to do and you're creating income that feels great and you never want to stop, this strategy of utilizing a Roth IRA to pay taxes now versus paying most likely higher tax rates down the road is going to be an extremely important strategy to start using. So when I have done different planning packages recently over the last couple of years, especially, we've done a lot of modeling around what does it look like to only fund a Roth IRA over time or a Roth 401k. What does that look like to not even worry about the current tax deduction, but instead to pay the taxes now and see what that does over time. So even considering like if tax rates stayed the same as they are right now, which is the kind of the baseline in the planning software that we use, if you for a lot of people, again, this is not advice, this is not specific advice for you. You do need to talk to your financial planner or a financial planner in order to see if this strategy is right for you. But time and time again, with a lot of the clients that I've been working with, the differences are astounding from how much they will pay over a lifetime. So a full lifespan of tax payments. So our financial planning systems can show us those estimates. And so that can be, if you are projected to have 5 million or 10 million or 30 million dollars by the time you're 90, that usually looks like, oh, you've also paid over that time multiple millions of dollars in taxes over your lifetime as well. And if we employ a Roth IRA or Roth 401k strategy, however that works for you, for most people, that brings that tax burden down also by multiple millions of dollars, because you're not being forced to take money out of those Roth IRAs the way you are if you save that money into traditional 401k or traditional IRA type assets. What do I mean by that? Okay, so we're going to back up just a little bit. We're going to talk about the difference between Roth and traditional. So Roth includes there is a Roth IRA, there is a Roth 401k, and there's also a Roth SEP, SEP IRA now as well. Again, I already explained it means you pay taxes. You do not get a tax deduction on the money that you contribute to those accounts in the current tax year, but it grows tax deferred. And then when you take the money out in retirement, it is tax free. There are also some other perks and benefits to that account where you can take out some of the principal after several years because it's already been taxed, right? So you do have a little bit more access and flexibility with the Roth IRA specifically than you do with some of the other accounts, but that's the main gist of the Roth. With the traditional types, so this is the quote unquote regular 401k, your if you're in the military, your TSP, your 403bs, your traditional IRAs, your simple IRA, your SEP IRA, any of these deductible qualified retirement accounts. In these types of accounts, if you put money in, you are receiving a tax deduction. So let's say you make $100,000 in 2025 and you put $7,000 into your traditional IRA, that deducts from your income so that you go from $100,000, deduct seven. So now your taxable income starts at 93,000, right? You can do that with a 401k too. Let's say you made $200,000 and you put $20,000 into your 401k. Now, instead of $200,000 being your taxable income, we deduct that 20,000 and your taxable income starts at $180,000. So you are getting you are taking that money out of your taxable income in the current year. What happens though in the future, so your money in those accounts also, like the Roth IRA, grows tax free. You do not pay taxes on the growth during the years that you're saving. But when you retire, let's say you retire at 60 again, and you want to take money out, you now have to pay taxes on the full amount. So if you, let's say you have $1 million in your 401k or traditional IRA by the time you retire, and you want to take out 4% per year. And so you take out $40,000 out of your million. Okay. That is going to be fully taxable income. It's going to be added to whatever else you want to take out. And you're going to pay taxes at whatever the tax rate is at that time. Let's say all your income sources combined put you in, we'll say, a 30% tax bracket. Let's say the lower tax brackets have gone up by then. If you're in the 30% tax bracket, you're going to take $40,000 out of that IRA and you're going to pay, that 30% tax rate on that withdrawal. And maybe right now, let's say this is where the real difference lies. Let's say right now you would be in the 24% tax bracket. So right now, in today's dollars in 2025, you could put that money, let's say it's again, $20,000 that you want to save, and you're in the 24% tax bracket. When all is said and done, when all your deductions are taken, all of that, that $20,000 could either go to a Roth IRA and you pay that 24% tax, or excuse me, a Roth 401k, or it could go into a traditional 401k, we'll say, and you put $20,000 into your traditional 401k and you don't pay any tax on that amount. So you're basically saving that 24% that you would have paid in taxes. Well, fast forward to, 20 years from now, when you're retiring, now you're in the 30% bracket. So when you take that money out, you're paying taxes at 30%. Versus if you were in the Roth 401k, you take that money out and you pay 0% taxes. That is the the future planning that we are doing, that we are forecasting, that we are, we don't have a crystal ball in this industry, but based on what's happening, that's the most likely conclusion is that tax rates in the future will likely be higher than what they are right now. It would be very, very surprising if we could lower tax rates or get rid of the income tax without pulling on another part of the economy, right? Like doing something drastically different that still requires the government to receive funds to be able to pay these interest payments and to change our debt and deficit situation on an overall level. So what are your different options there, right? And what if you've been, here's the big question. What if you've been funding traditional IRA or traditional 401k assets for a long time and you have large balances in your traditional IRA and traditional 401k? Well, that you can, one, for most people, um, you can choose, especially if you have a 401k. You can see if you're employed, you can see if your employer has a Roth 401k option where you can put your dollars into the Roth 401k with your employer. If you are self-employed, there is also a Roth 401k option if you're self-employed. If you are a solopreneur, so if you are, a team of one, or if it's just you and your spouse who work together, you can do what's called a solo 401k and you can start a solo Roth 401k. And that is super useful if you have, you know, more that you want to put away each year because 401ks have higher savings limits. You can put more into them than you can into a Roth IRA, for example. So that's one option is to see what Roth options are available to you. The second option is doing Roth conversions. And this can happen in a couple of different ways. You really, really need to speak with your financial advisor to see if Roth conversions are an option for you, because there are a lot of nuances around this, but I can't speak to all the nuances in one podcast, or it just wouldn't be super helpful, the way I'll put that. But especially if let's say you retire early, and you have some different sources where you can draw from income, and you have lower income years. One thing that you can do, so I've seen this with, especially with people who have had very high incomes for quite a while, and then when they retire, they have cash reserves available, they can live off their cash reserves, and then their taxable income drops really low for a period of years. During that lull, during that period of low income, you can take money out of your traditional IRA or out of your traditional 401k. Let's say you roll your 401k into an IRA. You can take money out of the traditional and convert it to your Roth IRA. And there's not a limit on how much you can convert. You just have to pay taxes. You have to pay taxes at the current rate on the amount that you convert. So the calculation that we do is how much tax does it make sense to pay right now in order to get that money over into your Roth so that it can then continue to grow tax free and then avoid any taxation in the future. So that's why, you wouldn't necessarily do, 200 or 300 or $400,000 in one year if you didn't have some other business deduction or something else that's, offsetting your income, because you don't want to put yourself into the highest tax bracket to do the conversion. You want to be able to stay in a little bit lower tax bracket while you convert that money. Ooh, I'm going to tell a story here that is super relevant, that could be super helpful to other people listening. So I have a client who experienced this many years ago, and it was a really big missed opportunity that they are still not happy about. You bring it up and it's like a little sore spot. So we don't really bring it up. Anyway, what happened was he had a large business. The word is completely slipping. A negative, he had a business loss. There we go. He had a large loss in one particular year in his business. He sold a particular business at a loss, and it had about a $300,000 loss. So it was significant by any standard. Well, he also had, so see, he had this big, negative $300,000 of income. And he has a business that runs and does, you know, several million per year total, and then he receives, several $100,000 in income for himself. And so the loss was eaten up over time, right? So it was beneficial in that he didn't have to pay full taxes on his income over a couple of years. But what would have been even more beneficial at that time was when he had that $300,000 loss and that negative $300,000 on his income statement, for his taxes, would have been to convert $300,000 from his traditional IRA at the time into his Roth. And that would have been a huge, huge leap forward, because he would not have paid taxes on that big of a conversion. It would have gotten it all into his Roth IRA, and then it would have continued to grow tax free over time. And it would have had, I mean, he was only in his very early 50s at the time. So it truly was like there was lots of time, you know, 20 plus years for that money to grow in the Roth IRA where it would never be taxed. So that was a big missed opportunity for him. And it was one of the things that spurred him on to find, a new advisor that would be more proactive and help him look at those kinds of things. And so I use that story to say, like, it really does depend, what's available to you, the strategies that are available to you are very dependent upon just year over year business. And it's super important to have those conversations and to be aware of what's available to you and to do that proactive tax and financial planning together every single year. So, how would we have done, like, for the CPA that this person was working with, he was like, well, we just, it's great. We don't have to pay taxes. And then he was very focused on current year taxes and reducing current year taxes. And that mindset is starting to fade out. People are realizing how important proactive tax planning actually is. So a lot of people are moving away from CPAs and tax planners that are only concerned about getting the most deductions right now and paying the least amount of taxes you can pay right now. Because sometimes it makes more sense. to pay the taxes now so that you are avoiding taxes in the future when we expect tax rates to be higher. Okay. Um, so that is one of the, like, again, biggest things that we can look at and plan for in the future in order to help you reach that, financial independence, and maybe even say independence from having to pay extra taxes when you are further on, when you are retiring, when you are past that age where you can start taking withdrawals from your retirement accounts. And here's the other super important part, and I want to mention this about Roth versus traditional. Right now in the tax code, because people do not pay taxes on, they get a deduction rather for anything that they contribute to a traditional IRA or traditional 401k or simple or SEP, any of those, because they get the current tax deduction. The IRS wants their taxes, right? Anything that goes into a traditional qualified retirement account, the IRS wants you to pay those taxes. And so it's not going to get around it. So when you turn right now, I believe it's age 73. This has shifted over time. So at age 73, you must start taking required minimum distributions, RMDs. So that is a percentage. The IRS has a table that, if you are 73, you have to take out this certain percentage. At 74, you have to take out this certain percentage. And it, goes along until you die, right? Like you have to take money out every single year. What happens for a lot of people who are saving and putting away a good amount and growing those retirement assets is that their required minimum distribution is actually forecasted to be more than what they actually need to take out. But they have to take it out and they have to pay the taxes because it's required by the IRS. And if you forget to take your RMD in any year, the next year, the penalty is very high for not having taken your RMD. And we don't want to do that. So with a Roth IRA, because you've already paid the taxes on the front side, there is no RMD requirement. There is no time in your entire life that you have to take money out. So if you had $1 million in a traditional IRA and you had $1 million in a traditional or in a Roth IRA, when you hit 73, you would have to take, I'm just going to put a number out there, you would have to take, we'll say $25,000 out of the traditional IRA, whether you needed it or not. Maybe you don't even need that money because you just don't need it. You don't need to take that distribution. Well, the IRS says you have to. So you must take that $25,000 out and you must pay taxes on it. In the Roth IRA, and it's $1 million as well, but there is no requirement. You hit age 73, maybe your business is still going and it's still paying you and you don't need the money. Your Roth IRA, you don't have to do a dang thing. You don't have to take any money out of it. It can just continue to grow. So your traditional IRA is now, $25,000 less. You had to pay taxes off of that $25,000, where your Roth IRA just gets to keep growing until you need it. Likewise, when you pass away with a traditional IRA, your heirs have to pay taxes. Your heirs will receive your beneficiaries, whatever they are, whether it's your family or, well, if you give it to a charity, that's a little bit different. But let's say, your children or your grandchildren or your heirs of some sort, nieces, nephews, receive money from your traditional IRA. They are required to pay taxes out of those balances. So if you have $1 million IRA and you have two kids and each child gets $500,000, they are then required to take required minimum distributions out of the IRA and pay taxes on that money. Exact same scenario. You have that $1 million in the Roth IRA. It gets passed down to your two children. They each get $500,000. It is not taxable. There is no taxable event. They have to take the money out over, they have a set period of time where they have to take withdrawals. They have to get the money out of the Roth IRA. But as they take that money out, there is no tax. So, I mean, truly, from a tax planning strategy, this is one of our most powerful tools. And it really, really, really does matter to start looking at the balance in your own portfolio, as to, what do you have that will be taxable in the future, and what do you have that will be exempt from tax in the future, and how do we start to plan for that balance as well. So again, I cannot speak to anyone's particular situation. Also, a word of caution, I will say that you have to know what you're eligible to contribute to. Every retirement account, whether it's a Roth account or a traditional account, has stipulations, has restrictions on how you can contribute to it. And as another word of caution, I have met people who have contributed to accounts on their own, talked to friends or listened to a podcast or saw, an influencer talking about something, and they just went and like, yeah, I'm going to open that Roth IRA and I'm going to contribute money to it without ever consulting an advisor. And then it comes to tax time and they were not eligible to contribute to that account. And now you have to unwind it. There are penalties to pay. It's not worth it. It's not helpful at all, to to go through that process and create an account and start contributing to things that you are not eligible to contribute to. That makes for such a mess later, and it can be very hard and frustrating to clean up. So I highly, highly encourage you to either talk to your financial advisor if you have someone that you like, or talk to a financial advisor if you have not been doing this and you want to start thinking about it and looking at the future tax strategies that are available to you, or start planning in that way. And if you don't have an advisor and you want someone who works the way that I work, I go over to, x2wealth.com, X, the numeral 2 wealth.com. And at that site, you can come and have a get to know you call with me to see if how I work is beneficial and the way that you would benefit from, being advised. So I'm totally open. When I talk to people, it really is all about clarity and alignment, to see if I am a good fit for you. And if I'm not, I know some awesome, awesome financial planners. And I have helped people find other planners. If I wasn't the right fit, I have awesome colleagues that I am always happy to refer business to if they are a better fit than I am, who also do this same work, who will also do this same forecasting, who will help you understand if a Roth vehicle is better than a traditional vehicle for your current situation, and to do all of that future planning. So do know that, I am not the only person that does work this way. But if you are interested, especially in the emotional and logical side, how you deal with money, from emotional, logical, spiritual, everything sense, that is my specialty and what I really enjoy helping people with. So you can go again to X numeral 2 wealth.com to grab a get to know you meeting with me there, to see if we're a good fit. So all those plugs done. If you have any questions that you have been curious about, if you're following, the budget bill and all of this and have questions about how all of that works and how it might affect you and how it might affect your business, reach out, send me a note, send me a question. You can send your questions to Hannah, Hannah, at expansiveceo.com. You can send me a DM on LinkedIn or Facebook or Instagram, or YouTube, right? You can post comments. I will see all of that. I actually do monitor all of my stuff personally. If you get a response that's from me, not from AI or a bot or an assistant. So yeah, you can reach out. You can send me an email, and send me your questions. I love to hear them. And for everyone who is listening on the 4th of July or on the 4th of July weekend, I hope you have a wonderful, wonderful weekend. I hope you celebrate just the way that you want to celebrate and get to really contemplate what independence and interdependence and all of these beautiful concepts mean to you and in your life. So thank you for listening. I appreciate you so much. If you liked this, I would so appreciate you to go and on whatever podcast platform you listen on, whether it's Apple or Spotify or Google or YouTube, leave a comment, like, subscribe, share it with someone who you think would benefit. Thanks so much and happy 4th of July. That's it for this episode. Thanks for listening, and be sure to like and subscribe. And again, if anything resonated with you from this episode, I would love to hear from you. Email me at Hannah, Hannah, at expansiveceo.com and tell me about it. And if you're ready for your greatest expansion, you can find ways to work with me at expansiveceo.com and at x2wealthplanning.com. That's X, the numeral 2, wealthplanning.com. So until next time, remember that there is enough, you are enough, and your birthright in this lifetime is to be expansive.